Lisa never imagined that a simple act of kindness would lead to the most tumultuous and transformative night of her life. It was a crisp autumn evening in her small, sleepy town, where the diner she worked at was a staple for locals. Lisa, a waitress with a warm smile and an ever-ready helping hand, had spent the past 6 years weaving herself into the fabric of the community. Regulars adored her for remembering their names, their coffee orders, and the little stories they shared over their meals. But tonight was different. Tonight, everything would change. The diner was busier than usual, buzzing with chatter and the clatter of dishes. Lisa moved swiftly between tables, balancing trays, refilling coffee cups, and exchanging pleasantries. She was exhausted, as always, but the sight of Frank at the window booth tugged at her heart. Frank was a homeless man who had been drifting through town for the past few months. He was a soft-spoken man with weathered hands and a tattered army jacket that seemed to carry the weight of his years. Lisa had taken the time to talk to him on several occasions, learning that he was a veteran who had fallen on hard times after losing his family and home. Tonight, Frank sat quietly, staring at the steaming cup of coffee someone had bought him earlier. Lisa noticed how he clutched it like it was a lifeline. His hollow cheeks and weary eyes spoke of hunger and despair. Her heart ached. She glanced at the menu taped to the counter, knowing full well that the prices were out of Frank's reach. The diner's unwritten policy was clear: nothing was given for free unless the owner approved it. But Lisa couldn't just walk past him without doing something. Taking a deep breath, she decided to act. She slipped into the kitchen, her mind racing. "Hey, Charlie," she said to the cook, a burly man with a soft spot for underdogs. "Can you whip up a plate of scrambled eggs and toast? Maybe throw in some bacon?" Charlie raised an eyebrow. "You footing the bill? You know Mitch won't like it if it's on the house." Lisa nodded, pulling a crumpled $10 bill from her apron. "It's on me. Just hurry, okay?" Minutes later, she placed the plate in front of Frank, who looked up at her with a mix of surprise and gratitude. "You didn't have to do this," he said softly, his voice cracking. "Yes, I did," Lisa replied with a reassuring smile. "Eat up. You deserve a hot meal." Frank hesitated for a moment before digging in, his hands trembling slightly as he lifted the fork. Lisa returned to her duties, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. She didn't notice Mitch, the diner's owner, standing by the register, his arms crossed and his lips pressed into a thin line. It wasn't until the end of her shift that Mitch confronted her. The diner had emptied out, and Lisa was wiping down tables when she heard his heavy footsteps behind her. "Lisa, we need to talk," he said curtly. She turned to face him, her stomach sinking at the tone of his voice. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Mitch echoed, his face reddening. "You gave away a free meal to that homeless guy, didn't you?" Lisa frowned. "I paid for it with my own money." "That's not the point." Mitch snapped. "You know the rules. We don't cater to freeloaders. It's bad for business. People see that, and they'll start expecting handouts." "Mitch, he's a veteran," Lisa argued, her voice rising. "He's hungry. I couldn't just ignore him." "Well, you should have," Mitch shot back. "Because now I've got to make an example of you. You're fired." The words hit Lisa like a punch to the gut. She stood frozen, her rag still in her hand. "You're serious?" she whispered. "Dead serious," Mitch said, his tone cold and final. "Clean out your locker and leave. Don't come back." Lisa felt a surge of anger and disbelief. She had given years of her life to this diner, working double shifts and sacrificing weekends. And now, she was being dismissed for showing compassion? She wanted to scream at Mitch, to tell him what an ungrateful, heartless man he was. But instead, she swallowed her pride and turned away, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. She walked home in the cool night air, her footsteps heavy and her mind racing. How was she going to pay rent this month? What would she tell her teenage daughter, Emily, who depended on her? As she rounded the corner to her street, she spotted something unusual, a black van parked just a few houses down from hers. Its windows were tinted, and its engine was idling softly. Lisa slowed her pace, her pulse quickening. The van hadn't been there earlier. It wasn't the kind of vehicle anyone in her modest neighborhood owned. As she passed it, she glanced at the driver's seat but couldn't make out the figure inside. The van's headlights flicked on briefly before going dark again, sending a shiver down her spine. Reaching her house, Lisa fumbled with her keys, glancing over her shoulder. The van hadn't moved, but its presence felt ominous. She stepped inside, bolted the door, and leaned against it, trying to shake off her unease. Emily was asleep in her room, oblivious to the turmoil her mother was facing. Lisa spent the night tossing and turning, replaying the events at the diner in her mind. The memory of Frank's gratitude was a small comfort, but it didn't erase the sting of losing her job. And the van, what was it doing there? Who was inside? These questions lingered, keeping her awake long after the town had gone quiet. At dawn, Lisa stepped outside to grab the newspaper and was startled to see the van still parked in the same spot. This time, the engine wasn't running, and the driver was nowhere in sight. A strange sense of dread and curiosity settled over her. She couldn't shake the feeling that her act of kindness had set something larger into motion, something she couldn't yet comprehend. Little did Lisa know, her life was about to take a turn she could never have predicted. The mysterious van was just the beginning. The morning sun bathed Lisa's modest house in a warm glow, but the brightness did little to ease her unease. She stood by the window, staring out at the black van still parked a few houses down. Its presence was unnerving, a silent specter on the quiet suburban street. She kept telling herself it was probably nothing, maybe someone visiting a neighbor or a repair service, but her gut told her otherwise. She tried to focus on her morning routine, brewing coffee and getting Emily ready for school, but her mind kept drifting back to the vehicle and the events of the previous night. Emily, a bright and inquisitive 15-year-old, noticed her mother's distracted state. "Mom, are you okay? You seem off," she said, pausing mid-bite of her cereal. Lisa forced a smile, not wanting to burden her daughter with her worries. "I'm fine, honey. Just a little tired, that's all." Emily wasn't convinced, but she didn't press further. She grabbed her backpack and headed out the door, leaving Lisa alone with her thoughts. As the minutes ticked by, Lisa's anxiety grew. She finally decided to confront her fears. Throwing on a jacket, she stepped outside, squinting against the morning sunlight. The van remained motionless, its black paint gleaming ominously. Lisa walked down the street, her heart pounding with each step. She approached the van cautiously, peering into the tinted windows, but saw nothing. The vehicle appeared empty. Summoning her courage, Lisa knocked on the driver's side door. The sound echoed in the stillness, but there was no response. She knocked again, louder this time, and still, nothing. Frustrated and a little relieved, she stepped back. Maybe it really was nothing. As she turned to walk away, she heard the faintest creak. The driver's side door opened slightly, and a man stepped out. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and a sharp, tailored suit that seemed out of place in their modest neighborhood. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Lisa's, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, the man broke the silence. "Lisa Carter?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "Who's asking?" she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "My name is Daniel Whitaker," the man said, extending a hand. "I represent an organization that takes an interest in people like you." "People like me?" Lisa echoed, her brow furrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" Daniel smiled, a small, enigmatic smile that did little to put her at ease. Let's just say we notice when someone does something extraordinary. May I have a moment of your time? Lisa hesitated. Every instinct told her to walk away, to retreat to the safety of her home. But curiosity, and a lingering sense of defiance after the events at the diner, compelled her to stay. All right, she said cautiously. But make it quick. Daniel gestured toward the van. I understand you lost your job last night. Lisa's eyes widened. How do you know that? We keep track of stories like yours, he said, his tone matter of fact. Your act of kindness didn't go unnoticed. The world needs more people like you, and our organization is dedicated to supporting individuals who are willing to go above and beyond for others. Lisa crossed her arms, skepticism creeping into her voice. And what exactly is your organization? Daniel paused, as if weighing his words. It's called the Beacon Initiative. We identify people who perform selfless acts and provide them with resources to create meaningful change in their communities. Lisa let out a bitter laugh. Resources? Like what? A new job? Because I could really use one right about now. Daniel's expression remained calm. It's more than that. We want to offer you an opportunity to lead a program aimed at helping the homeless in your town. We'll provide funding, training, and support. All we ask is that you bring the same compassion and determination you showed last night. Lisa stared at him, struggling to process what she was hearing. You want me to run a program? I'm a waitress, not a social worker. I don't know the first thing about starting something like that. That's where we come in, Daniel said. You won't be alone. We'll guide you every step of the way. But the decision is yours. If you're not interested, we'll respect that and leave you to your life. Lisa hesitated, the weight of his words settling over her. It sounded too good to be true, and yet, something about Daniel's demeanor made her want to believe him. Why me? She asked finally. Why not someone more qualified? Because you care, Daniel said simply. And that's something we can't teach. The words hit Lisa like a punch to the gut. She thought about Frank, about the look of gratitude on his face as he ate the meal she'd given him. She thought about Emily, about the example she wanted to set for her daughter. But doubts lingered. What if she failed? What if this whole thing was some elaborate scam? I need time to think, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course, Daniel replied, handing her a business card. Take all the time you need. When you're ready, call me. Lisa took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. Without another word, Daniel climbed back into the van and drove off, leaving her standing in the middle of the street. She stared after the vehicle until it disappeared from view, her mind racing. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lisa couldn't stop thinking about Daniel's offer. She tried to distract herself by cleaning the house and running errands, but the thought kept creeping back in. By the time Emily returned from school, Lisa was a bundle of nerves. Mom, are you okay? Emily asked, dropping her backpack by the door. Lisa forced a smile. Yeah, I'm fine. Just had a strange day. Emily tilted her head, studying her mother's face. You want to talk about it? Lisa hesitated. She didn't want to burden her daughter, but she also knew she couldn't make this decision alone. Taking a deep breath, she told Emily about Daniel and the Beacon Initiative. When she finished, Emily's eyes were wide with disbelief. That's amazing. Emily said. You have to do it, Mom. Lisa frowned. What if it's a scam? Or what if I mess it up? I've never done anything like this before. You'll figure it out, Emily said with a confidence that made Lisa's heart swell. You're the strongest person I know. And besides, isn't this what you've always wanted? A chance to make a real difference? Lisa didn't respond right away. She thought about all the times she'd dreamed of doing something meaningful, of leaving the world a little better than she'd found it. Maybe this was her chance. But the fear of failure loomed large. That night, as Lisa lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she made her decision. She would call Daniel in the morning. She didn't know what the future held, but she couldn't let fear hold her back. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it. The morning air was crisp as Lisa stood by the window, clutching the business card Daniel had given her. The bold letters spelled out Beacon Initiative along with his name and a phone number. She had spent a sleepless night going over the conversation in her head, weighing the risks and potential rewards. Deep down, she knew this was a rare opportunity, something extraordinary that didn't come knocking every day. But the doubts lingered. Could she really take on something so monumental? Lisa finally picked up her phone and dialed the number. It rang twice before Daniel's calm voice answered. "This is Daniel Whitaker." "It's Lisa," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've made my decision. I'll do it." There was a brief pause on the other end before Daniel replied, "I'm glad to hear that, Lisa. You've made the right choice. Let's get started." Within an hour, a sleek black sedan pulled up in front of her house. This time, Daniel wasn't alone. A woman stepped out of the car, carrying a laptop bag and wearing a friendly smile. She introduced herself as Clara, Daniel's colleague and an experienced project manager for the Beacon Initiative. Together, they sat down in Lisa's modest living room, transforming her coffee table into an impromptu workspace. The first order of business was to outline the program. Daniel explained that the initiative would focus on providing meals, shelter, and job training for the homeless population in the area. Lisa's role would be to act as the community liaison, coordinating with local businesses, volunteers, and organizations to build the program from the ground up. Clara reassured Lisa that she wouldn't be alone, they would provide all the necessary resources, from funding to training. Lisa felt a mix of excitement and apprehension as she listened. The idea of making a tangible difference filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years, but the enormity of the task was daunting. She voiced her concerns, and Clara leaned forward, her tone encouraging. "You don't have to be perfect, Lisa. You just have to care. That's why you're here." By the time the meeting ended, Lisa felt a spark of determination. She wasn't sure how she was going to pull this off, but she knew she had to try. The first step, Daniel explained, was to hold a community meeting to gauge interest and recruit volunteers. They set the date for the following week, giving Lisa just enough time to spread the word. Lisa threw herself into the task with everything she had. She walked the streets of her small town, handing out flyers to anyone who would listen. She stopped by the local library, community center, and even the church, asking to post notices on their bulletin boards. Most people responded with curiosity and cautious optimism, though a few were skeptical. "Helping the homeless is a noble cause," one shop owner said, "but it's not an easy one. People around here aren't exactly eager to get involved." Lisa nodded, acknowledging the challenges. Still, she refused to let the negativity deter her. She had a vision of what this program could be, a lifeline for people like Frank, who had slipped through the cracks. Speaking of Frank, she made it a point to track him down and tell him about the initiative. She found him in the park, sitting on a bench with his dog-eared notebook. Frank's face lit up when he saw her, though the spark of joy quickly gave way to concern when she mentioned the diner. "You got fired because of me?" he asked, his brow furrowed with guilt. "It's not your fault," Lisa assured him. "If anything, it was the push I needed to do something bigger. And I could really use your help with this." Frank seemed taken aback. "Me? What can I do?" "You can share your story," Lisa said. "You've lived this experience. You know what people like you need better than anyone else." Frank hesitated, clearly unsure of himself, but after a moment, he nodded. All right. I'll do what I can. The week flew by in a blur of preparations. When the day of the meeting arrived, Lisa felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. The community center was modest but functional, with rows of folding chairs and a small stage at the front. To her surprise, more people showed up than she had expected. There were familiar faces from the diner, neighbors, and even a few local business owners. But what truly moved her was the sight of Frank, standing near the back with a small group of homeless individuals he had convinced to come. Daniel and Clara were there, blending into the crowd and letting Lisa take the lead. As she stepped onto the stage, her hands trembled slightly, but she steadied herself. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice clear and steady. "My name is Lisa Carter, and like many of you, I've seen the challenges our town faces. But I've also seen the incredible potential we have to make a difference. This isn't just about helping the homeless, it's about lifting up our entire community." She spoke from the heart, sharing her story about the night she gave Frank a meal and the events that followed. She talked about the Beacon Initiative's vision and how it could transform lives. By the time she finished, the room was silent, the audience hanging on her every word. Frank stepped forward next, sharing his own story with quiet dignity. He talked about his struggles, his regrets, and his hopes for a second chance. His honesty struck a chord with the audience, and Lisa could see the impact it was having. When the meeting ended, people lined up to sign volunteer sheets and offer donations. Clara approached Lisa with a proud smile. "You did it," she said. "This is the start of something incredible." But not everyone was on board. As Lisa packed up, she overheard a group of people murmuring near the door. "It's a nice idea, but do you really think it'll work? People don't change that easily," one man said. Lisa felt a pang of doubt but pushed it aside. She knew this was just the beginning, and there would be challenges ahead. As she left the community center, Frank walked beside her, his usual stoic expression softened by a rare smile. "You're really something, you know that," he said. Lisa laughed. "I'm just trying to do what feels right." They parted ways, and Lisa returned home, exhausted but hopeful. As she climbed into bed that night, she couldn't help but think about how far she had come in such a short time. For the first time in years, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. But little did she know, the challenges ahead would test her in ways she couldn't imagine. The journey was only just beginning. The days following the community meeting were a whirlwind of activity for Lisa. The turnout had exceeded her expectations, but now came the hard part, turning enthusiasm into action. She spent every waking hour organizing the next steps, coordinating with Clara and Daniel while juggling the influx of volunteers. Despite the promising start, doubts loomed large in Lisa's mind. Could she really pull this off? The first major challenge was finding a suitable space to launch the program. The community center was an option, but its schedule was packed with other activities. Lisa visited potential locations across town, ranging from vacant storefronts to rundown warehouses, but nothing seemed viable. Each rejection chipped away at her confidence, leaving her more anxious about the road ahead. As she was about to give up for the day, she received a call from Clara. "We might have a lead," Clara said. "There's an old church on Maple Avenue. The congregation relocated a few years ago, but the building is still structurally sound. I've already spoken with the property owner, and they're open to letting us use it, for free." Lisa felt a surge of relief. She immediately drove to the church, where Clara was waiting. The building was dusty and in need of repairs, but Lisa could see the potential. The high ceilings and wide-open space felt welcoming, almost sacred in its simplicity. She envisioned rows of tables for meals, a corner dedicated to resources and job training, and a small area for sleeping mats. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The next hurdle was funding. While the Beacon Initiative provided seed money, it wasn't enough to cover the renovations needed for the church or the operational costs of the program. Lisa knew she'd have to raise additional funds from the community. With Clara's help, she organized a fundraiser, a community dinner at the diner where she'd once worked. The irony wasn't lost on Lisa as she approached Mitch, the diner's owner, to ask for his support. She half expected him to slam the door in her face, but to her surprise, he agreed. "I'm not proud of how things ended," Mitch admitted, his voice gruff. "But I respect what you're trying to do. Let's call it my way of making things right." Word of the fundraiser spread quickly, and on the night of the event, the diner was packed. Tables were adorned with simple centerpieces, and volunteers buzzed around, serving dishes donated by local restaurants. Lisa stood near the entrance, greeting guests and thanking them for their support. She spotted Frank at a corner table, deep in conversation with a group of homeless individuals he'd brought along. The sight warmed her heart. It was a reminder of why she'd started this journey. As the evening progressed, Lisa took the stage to thank everyone for their contributions. She spoke passionately about the program's mission and shared stories of the people it aimed to help. Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom opened their wallets and donated generously. By the end of the night, they had raised enough money to begin renovations on the church. But not everything went smoothly. The growing visibility of the program attracted attention from critics. Some accused Lisa of enabling the homeless, claiming her efforts would bring trouble to the town. Others questioned her qualifications, suggesting she was in over her head. Lisa tried to brush off the negativity, but the harsh comments stung. She couldn't help but wonder if they were right. Was she really the right person for this? One morning, as Lisa was reviewing renovation plans with Clara, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Mayor Thompson, a stern yet well-respected figure in the community. He walked into the church with an air of authority, his sharp suit contrasting starkly with the dusty surroundings. "I've been hearing a lot about your program," the mayor said, his tone measured. "And while I appreciate the sentiment, I'm concerned about the impact it might have on the town." Lisa felt a wave of defensiveness but kept her tone polite. "With all due respect, Mayor Thompson, the impact we're trying to have is a positive one. These people need help, and this program is about giving them a chance to rebuild their lives." The mayor nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'm not against helping the homeless, but I need to ensure this initiative doesn't create more problems than it solves. I'll be keeping a close eye on your progress." The exchange left Lisa rattled, but it also strengthened her resolve. She wasn't doing this for approval or accolades, she was doing it because it was the right thing to do. Still, the pressure was mounting, and Lisa felt the weight of every decision she made. As the renovations got underway, Lisa faced another unexpected challenge. Frank disappeared. He stopped showing up at the church and wasn't at his usual spots around town. Worried, Lisa reached out to local shelters and police, but no one had seen him. The absence of her most vocal supporter left her feeling adrift, and she couldn't shake the fear that something had happened to him. Just as she was beginning to lose hope, Lisa received a call late one evening. It was Frank. His voice was strained, and he sounded hesitant. "I'm sorry I've been MIA," he said. "Something came up." "Frank, where are you? Are you okay?" Lisa asked, relief flooding her voice. "I'm fine," he replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Can we meet? There's something I need to tell you." They agreed to meet at the park the next morning. When Lisa arrived, she found Frank sitting on their usual bench, looking more disheveled than usual. He hesitated before speaking, as if searching for the right words. "I didn't tell you the whole truth about my past," Frank admitted, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I've done some things I'm not proud of. Things that might come back to haunt this program." Lisa's heart sank. "What are you talking about?" Frank explained that years ago, he had been involved in a series of petty crimes, driven by desperation and bad influences. While he had turned his life around since then, some of his old acquaintances had resurfaced, threatening to expose his past if he didn't help them. "They're asking me for money," Frank said, his voice trembling. "I don't have much, but I'm afraid they'll target the program if I don't give them what they want." Lisa felt a surge of anger, not at Frank, but at the people exploiting his vulnerability. "You don't have to face this alone," she said firmly. "We'll figure this out together." The revelation added another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation. Lisa knew she couldn't let Frank's past jeopardize the program, but she also refused to abandon him. She reached out to Daniel and Clara, who helped devise a plan to address the threats while protecting Frank and the initiative. Despite the setbacks, progress continued. The church began to take shape as a community hub, with volunteers painting walls, assembling furniture, and setting up resources. The grand opening was just weeks away, and Lisa felt a renewed sense of hope. The journey had been anything but smooth, but every obstacle had only made her more determined. As Lisa stood in the church one evening, surveying the progress, she realized how much had changed since that fateful night at the diner. She had gone from being a waitress to a leader, from doubting her abilities to inspiring others. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Lisa felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The grand opening of the program was set for a Saturday morning, and Lisa's nerves were on edge as the day approached. The once abandoned church had been transformed into a welcoming space, filled with tables for meals, shelves stocked with donated clothing and hygiene products, and a corner designated for job resources. Volunteers bustled about, adding final touches, while Lisa tried to calm the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. This was the culmination of months of effort, countless sleepless nights, and moments of doubt. It was also the beginning of something much bigger. On the morning of the event, the weather seemed to mirror Lisa's optimism. The sun shone brightly, and a gentle breeze carried the sounds of chatter as people began to gather. The turnout was better than Lisa had hoped for. Dozens of community members, local leaders, and even a few reporters from nearby towns had come to see the launch of the initiative. Banners hung over the entrance to the church, declaring the start of a new chapter for the community. Lisa stood at the entrance, greeting attendees with a mixture of pride and nervous energy. Frank arrived early, dressed in clean clothes donated by one of the volunteers. He looked more confident than she'd ever seen him, and when he caught her eye, he gave her a small nod of encouragement. It was a moment that filled her with warmth. Frank had come a long way, and his presence was a testament to the program's potential. Daniel and Clara were also in attendance, blending into the crowd as they observed the event. Daniel approached Lisa, his calm demeanor steadying her nerves. "You've done an incredible job," he said. "This is exactly what we envisioned when we approached you." Lisa smiled, though her hands trembled slightly. "I just hope it makes a difference." "It already has," Daniel replied. "Now go out there and show them what this is all about." The event began with a speech from Mayor Thompson, who had gradually shifted from a cautious skeptic to a cautious supporter. His words were measured but encouraging, acknowledging Lisa's efforts and the community's role in making the program a reality. When he finished, Lisa took the stage. Her heart raced as she looked out at the crowd, but as she began to speak, her voice grew steady. "This program started with a simple act of kindness," she said, her eyes scanning the audience. "It started because I saw someone in need and couldn't look away. But this isn't just about me or Frank or any one person. It's about all of us coming together to create a community where no one is left behind." She shared stories of the challenges they had faced, from finding a space to overcoming criticism. She spoke about the importance of compassion, resilience, and unity. By the time she finished, the audience erupted in applause. Lisa stepped off the stage, her cheeks flushed, and was immediately surrounded by well-wishers and volunteers eager to start. The opening day was a success. Dozens of people in need came through the doors, receiving hot meals, clean clothes, and access to resources. Volunteers worked tirelessly, guided by Lisa's example, and the atmosphere was one of hope and renewal. Frank took on a leadership role, helping to coordinate services and connect with those who were hesitant to ask for help. His empathy and understanding made him an invaluable part of the team. But as the program gained momentum, it also attracted more attention, some of it unwanted. A week after the grand opening, Lisa received a letter in the mail. It was from a group of local business owners who opposed the initiative, claiming it would bring undesirable elements to the area. The letter was signed by several prominent names, including one she recognized, the owner of a large shopping plaza who had never been shy about expressing his disdain for the homeless. Lisa felt a surge of frustration as she read the letter. The accusations were baseless and filled with thinly veiled prejudice. She knew she had to respond, but she also knew she couldn't let anger dictate her actions. With Clara's help, she crafted a thoughtful reply, addressing each concern with facts and emphasizing the program's positive impact on the community. She also invited the signatories to visit the church and see the work being done firsthand. To her surprise, one of the business owners, a younger man who ran a local cafe, took her up on the offer. He spent an afternoon volunteering, serving meals and talking to the people who came through the doors. By the end of the day, he was visibly moved. "I didn't realize how much this was needed," he admitted. "You're doing something really important here." The cafe owner's change of heart was a small but significant victory. He became an advocate for the program, convincing other business owners to support it as well. The shopping plaza owner remained opposed, but Lisa refused to let his negativity overshadow the growing wave of community support. As the weeks turned into months, the program continued to evolve. Lisa faced countless challenges, from balancing the budget to managing disagreements among volunteers, but each obstacle was a learning experience. The church became a hub of activity, not just for the homeless but for anyone in the community looking to make a difference. It hosted workshops, support groups, and even social events, fostering a sense of belonging that had been missing for so many. One evening, as Lisa was locking up after a long day, Frank approached her. He looked more at ease than she'd ever seen him, and there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You've changed a lot of lives, Lisa," he said. "Including mine." Lisa shook her head, a smile tugging at her lips. "We've all done this together. You're as much a part of this as I am." Frank hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "I wrote this down a while ago," he said, handing it to her. "I wasn't sure if I'd ever share it, but I think it's time." Lisa unfolded the paper to find a short but heartfelt message. It was a thank you note, written in Frank's unsteady handwriting, expressing his gratitude for the program and the second chance it had given him. The words brought tears to Lisa's eyes. "Frank, this means more to me than you'll ever know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. As she stood there, holding the note, Lisa realized how much her life had changed since that fateful night at the diner. She had stepped into the unknown, driven by nothing more than a desire to help, and in doing so, she had found a purpose she never imagined. The challenges were far from over, but for the first time, she felt truly confident in her ability to face them. The program had not only transformed Lisa and Frank but also the community as a whole. People who had once been strangers now worked side by side, united by a shared goal. The church had become more than just a building, it was a symbol of hope, compassion, and the power of coming together. As Lisa turned off the lights and stepped outside, the cool night air wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. She looked up at the stars, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. Her journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Months passed, and the program had grown beyond Lisa's wildest dreams. The once abandoned church was now a bustling hub of hope and activity. The walls that had once echoed with silence now resounded with laughter, conversation, and the hum of determination. Volunteers from all walks of life worked tirelessly to keep the initiative running, and the results were tangible. Families found meals, individuals received job training, and the homeless population began to feel a sense of belonging that had long eluded them. Lisa, however, knew that the journey was far from over. The challenges came daily, more people seeking help than resources could handle, budget constraints that kept her awake at night, and the constant balancing act of running a program that relied so heavily on community support. But she also knew she was no longer alone. She had a team, a family of people who believed in the mission just as fiercely as she did. One day, Lisa received a letter that made her heart skip a beat. It was from a regional foundation that awarded grants to community programs like hers. The letter began with the usual pleasantries, but as she read further, her eyes widened. The Beacon Initiative had been selected for a substantial grant, enough to expand their services significantly. The relief was overwhelming. For the first time in months, Lisa felt like she could breathe. She immediately called Daniel and Clara, who were just as thrilled as she was. The program's impact rippled through the community. Local businesses began hiring individuals who had gone through the center's job training programs. Schools partnered with the initiative to provide tutoring for homeless children. Even the town's social climate began to shift, with more people volunteering and advocating for systemic change. Lisa often marveled at how much had grown from that single act of kindness months ago. But the most profound transformation was within Lisa herself. She had started this journey as a waitress who had lost her job for helping a homeless man. Now, she was a leader, a force for change in her community. She had discovered a strength and resilience she never knew she had. The insecurities that had once plagued her were replaced by a quiet confidence, a belief in her ability to make a difference. One evening, as Lisa was reviewing reports in her office, Frank knocked on the door. He entered with a hesitant smile and a folder in his hands. "I've been working on something," he said, handing her the folder. Inside was a proposal for a new program focused on helping veterans reintegrate into society. It included ideas for counseling services, job placement, and even housing assistance. Lisa looked up at Frank, her eyes brimming with pride. "This is incredible," she said. "You've put so much thought into this." Frank shrugged, though he couldn't hide the satisfaction in his expression. "I just figured it was time to do more. There are a lot of guys like me out there who need help." Lisa nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Let's make it happen." The new program launched a few months later, and it quickly became one of the center's most successful initiatives. Frank took the lead, using his experiences to connect with veterans in a way that few others could. Watching him thrive in this role was one of Lisa's greatest joys. It was a reminder of why she had started this journey in the first place, to give people the tools and support they needed to rebuild their lives. As the program celebrated its first anniversary, the entire community came together for a special event at the center. There were speeches, performances, and a slideshow showcasing the impact of the initiative. Lisa stood on the stage, looking out at the crowd that had become her extended family. Frank was in the front row, his smile a testament to how far they had both come. "This program started with a simple meal," Lisa began, her voice steady. "One meal, shared with one person. That act of kindness set off a chain reaction that none of us could have predicted. It's a reminder that even the smallest actions can lead to extraordinary change." She paused, taking a moment to let the words sink in. "We've faced challenges, and we've made mistakes, but we've also built something beautiful, something that proves what's possible when we come together. This isn't just my story or Frank's story. It's our story. And it's only the beginning." The audience erupted in applause, and Lisa felt a swell of emotion. As she stepped off the stage, she was surrounded by people offering hugs, handshakes, and words of encouragement. It was a moment of pure joy, a culmination of everything they had worked for. Later that night, as Lisa walked home, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the struggles, the triumphs, and the people who had made it all possible. Her heart was full, not just with pride but with gratitude. The program had transformed her life, giving her a purpose she never imagined. And in doing so, it had transformed an entire community. Looking up at the stars, Lisa whispered a silent vow to keep moving forward, to keep fighting for those who needed help. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: kindness had the power to change everything. And she was determined to prove it every single day.